Welcome to Morning Coffee and Mimosas. I'm Christina.
And I'm Joe.
We are a father-daughter duo. We come here Sunday mornings, but you can come here anytime you please. We banter about life, about business, and we do it over coffee and mimosas. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. See, and now you know what we do. So.
Dad, who are you talking to? You should tell the listeners.
I am. I'm honored. So we have the wonderful, amazing Peter Akkies on the podcast this morning. And Peter is a productivity. Well, I'm going to let you say it, Peter, but he's a productivity genius.
Let's say expert. Sounds better.
Expert. Better.
Not guru.
And, yeah, right. What?
Definitely not guru.
No. All things Apple and productivity apps, task managers, and that's just a piece. And Peter, I will. We're honored to have you, so I'm going to let you finish that off.
Yeah, well, and listeners, we're excited about this episode because we're joined by by Peter, really cool guest, somebody that my dad's been following for quite some time, and you've heard us in some other episodes talk about different tools that he's used to manage his schedule and his life. And I just recently learned where they have been coming from. So Peter, thank you. And as a new follower on your YouTube channel, and somebody who's a little bit less technically savvy when it comes to productivity and organization, and somebody who is always searching for new tools, I've really enjoyed following you. So would you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, Peter, and kind of how you got into this productivity personal growth game?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, first of all. Really excited to talk about these topics with you all. Let me try to condense this. So essentially, these days what I do is I help people be more organized and more productive by using personal to-do apps. That's the gist of it. And I do that through online courses, so video courses, and through my YouTube channel, mainly. And I started off, working as a consultant after college for a couple of years in the U.S., actually, even though I'm Dutch and I live in Amsterdam again today. But I totally burned out from that job after a couple of years. Had to leave the country, sadly. Had to leave the U.S. because I was on a work visa. And the U.S. is not very nice if you are on a work visa and you quit your job. There's no grace period.
We apologize on behalf of this country.
Yeah. Thanks. That was a shame. But then I spent a couple of years thinking, you know what, I really want to make money on my own. And so I tried out a bunch of online business ideas. Some stuff had to do with doing marketing for yoga studios, nothing related to what I'm doing now. And at some point I hit on this business where it turns out that I've always been quite an organized person, quite a productive person. And I used certain apps to organize my life. And I've done that for a long time. And I just started making some videos about that. And people appreciated that. Turned that into an online course that I now sell and help people. And at some point I ran a live course on Zoom as well for a while. So yeah, that's me.
That's great.
Incredible.
Great.
And tell us a little bit about the growth of this community that follows you. So you've obviously struck a chord that resonates, because there are a lot of people that are not quite as organized as you that are looking for somebody to say, hey, how do we do this? How do we become more productive? So can you tell us a little bit about what this community looks like and how it's grown over the years?
Yeah, I don't usually think of it as a community. And the reason for that is I try to teach people things that are very broadly applicable. So, for example, if you have an iPhone, it comes with a Notes app. It comes with a Reminders app. What are some of the things that you can do with those apps? Turns out that you can do a lot with those apps. And if I make videos on my YouTube channel showing people what you can do with those apps, that applies to so many people. There's no real common denominator other than people have an iPhone or a Mac or an iPad, right? Whereas with the way that I started off my business was with some more niche apps, with a specific app, one called OmniFocus, and more recently also another one called Things3. Those are task management apps. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit. Let's see. And That's a little bit closer to a community because now you're talking about people using specific apps to keep track of everything that they need to do in their personal life and in their work life. But I've never thought of it as a community, not in the sense of like we all have a passion for volleyball and I have a local volleyball community. You know, it's not like that, right? It is, however, now that lately I've been focusing more on my YouTube channel, particularly this year. I used to think of YouTube only as marketing for my business. It's like, I'll put some free videos out there and I'm like, if you like these, you know, why don't you buy my course? But I've put more effort into YouTube as a main thing so far this year. So not only trying to use it as a marketing vehicle, but also just teaching people stuff on YouTube just because it's nice and to increase my online profile and, you know, to raise my number of subscribers, make a little bit of money with AdSense as well, you know, ads on YouTube and stuff. Now it's starting to feel a little bit more like a community because there's more interaction. There's people commenting on my videos and saying, hey, I really love this. Can you make more of this? Can you help me out with this other app? So it's starting to feel slightly more like a community, but it's still broad, you know, very broadly applicable to lots of people.
Right. Well, that makes that you just cleared something up for me too, because in watching your videos, and we'll get to things 3 and other things, but you were recently doing something on how to organize using the Reminders app on the iPhone, and then another video on Notion.
I loved that, by the way. It kind of changed my whole my husband and I now have a shared grocery list and things like that.
Wonderful.
Based on what you shared, you said how you and your girlfriend use it, and I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you appreciated that because the video didn't do that well. You know, as a YouTuber, we're always thinking of how our videos are performing, how many views have they had. This one didn't do so well, so I'm actually thinking I need to do a little work on it, come up with maybe a better thumbnail because sometimes that can make all the difference on YouTube.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah.
Well, I thought the content was great. Maybe that just speaks to, you know, how remedial I am in, you know, organization, but I loved it.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. So I have some questions, and Christina's going to zone out now because she's not going to know what we're talking about, Peter. But
excuse me. I think I will.
Okay, good. So when I used Todoist, and then it was starting to frustrate me, and I switched to TickTick, which is super powerful and was amazing. And where I really started, I was going to start writing to you on your YouTube channel where you keep pushing things 3 and things 3 and things 3, and you weren't the only one. Other people were saying just how wonderful things 3 is. And earlier this year, I actually bought it and then said it's weak, and I got a refund immediately. But then I came back to it, and I actually bought the iPad app, the iPhone app, and the Mac app. I have a MacBook Air.
I'm starting to think that you just like to buy things, get a refund, and then go back to them. He did the same thing with Riverside.
Yeah. That's another story.
A little impulsive there.
But I decided before...
He likes to test customer service to make sure he's going to buy in.
That's right.
Okay.
But before this podcast, I said, you know what? I really need to be able to speak about things 3. So I went full bore, and trust me, I use a task manager like massively heavily.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know all the ins and outs. And I kind of get it now. I get what you're talking about. But I do have questions, you know, about that. But my question is, you were OmniFocus, which I never used. And I don't know if you ever, and I know you used Todoist and so on, but what was it for you that took things 3 and made that why you wanted to invest so much of your energy in promoting? And I know you know, forget affiliate stuff. I don't know, but I don't think you get any of that, but you know what I'm saying? What made you go that way?
That's a great question. So let me set the context a little bit for listeners who may not be super familiar with these apps, right?
Yes.
I believe that everybody should be using some kind of app, or you could do it on paper if you really want to, but apps these days are so good that it's often easier to use an app just to keep track of everything you need to do, because everybody's got so many things to do in so many different parts of their life, whether it's home maintenance tasks, you know, things like doing the laundry, watering the plants, like taking out the trash, or really complicated work projects, things things like make sure to make a dentist appointment, once every 6 months, 1 year, however often you want to go to the dentist. And it's just hard to keep track of all of that. There's no reason why you should have to do that in your head. And most of us don't have an executive assistant who literally does everything for us. So most people should be using an app for this. And when I first started teaching people how to do this, I started off with an app called OmniFocus. I used OmniFocus for, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. And I was very happy with it, teaching people how to use it. And I think a lot of the time people are not that tech savvy. They don't get excited about specific apps. If I start talking to someone about a certain app, 99% of people, they'll sort of just zone out. And people will sometimes say, oh, it doesn't matter which app you use to do this, as long as you're using an app. It's sort of kind of true. If you are not writing anything down, right? If you're trying to remember everything that you need to do at home, at your job, in your volunteer work, whatever you do, in your head, then using any kind of system will probably generate massive improvement for you. However, once you are in the habit of using a system, it turns out that certain apps are just much more helpful than others. And I wanted to make sure that I taught people how to use like the best apps that make the most sense, that make your life the easiest, and make you remember everything, make sure nothing slips through the cracks, help you complete your projects and achieve your goals. And so for a long time, I thought OmniFocus was the best one. And now I'm a bigger fan of an app called Things 3, which you mentioned, which I have no affiliate relationship with, by the way.
Yeah, we've said that.
I would love to.
We'll tag Things 3, just putting a good word in here. But
no,
that's
listen,
also...
if you want to, I will totally do it. But they're not the most communicative people, unfortunately, the people who make that app. So
Right.
I did recently run a giveaway in collaboration with them. This is as far as I've gotten. So
Yeah.
But I think that's even like, sometimes once you take it to the point where, you're an affiliate, all of a sudden the opinion pieces and the direction are a little bit like, there's a little bit more skin in the game for you to like Things 3 versus you just being bought into this is the best tool, right? Because tomorrow there might be a new tool and you might say, I loved Things 3 just like OmniFocus was your, prior 7 years. And you may say, hey guys, community that has now formed that's, really invested in learning and keeping up with productivity hacks and how to best manage all of the things that are going on in their lives. You may say, hey, there's a new tool. And, this is how it can impact your life. And it may not be Things 3 anymore. And I think that's something that your followers definitely appreciate.
Yeah, 100%. Because initially I started my online business teaching people how to use this app called OmniFocus, right? And I felt some loyalty to that for a while because it's sort of starting to teach how to use this app is what got my online business off the ground. And after burning out so heavily in my corporate consulting job in the US, I vowed I will never take a job again. So I had to make money in some independent way that did not involve having a job. So I was actually very grateful to them for that. And my business really started going after I made a video course about OmniFocus. And then I said, listen, guys, people who make OmniFocus, can I write something on your website, some tips on how to use this app? In return, you link to my course and you tell people if you want to learn more, buy Peter's course. And they did that. So then I had on the official website, I had an article with my name on it and a link to my course. And that kind of got me going. But then it turns out that their development has been quite slow for a number of years now. And this other app has been developing faster, Things 3, and to the point where I think it's better now. And also, not just better, but also easier to understand for people who are new to the app, which is a big one for me since I'm teaching how to do it. It really helps to have something that's simpler yet equally capable. I struggled with that for a while. I was like, do I really want to tell my people, like, listen, I think you should actually be using this other app now, because I did feel some loyalty towards OmniFocus for having got my business off the ground. But it's exactly as you say, Christina, I just want to be honest with people. And I want to be able to give them an opinion that is not based on finances. I want to be able to give them an opinion and say, I think this is the best app for most people, and I will therefore recommend it to you unless there's some special circumstances or something like that. And you know what? That actually feels good. It's nice to just be able to be honest with people, even if I really only wanted to maximize for making as much money as possible, probably wasn't the right choice. But,
Well, yeah. I think it's a good direction that you've taken. So if we were to break this down, because probably most of the people listening to this podcast, and selfishly myself, are, at the point where I'm trying to figure out, how do I start to take what I do on a piece of paper, on my whiteboards in my office, on the notes in my phone, but kind of all over the place, right? Like, I'm like organized ish, right?
Yeah.
Organized enough to get done what I need to get done, but I could be much better. And that's a goal that I certainly have, to tackle. So if we're thinking that there's probably a broad community of our listeners that are a little bit newer to tools, right? And maybe haven't stepped into, really starting to automate their organization.
Yeah.
What would you say are the building blocks or the biggest things that people should be thinking about before we get into things 3 and, the tools? What are the building blocks and things that somebody should be looking for in the system ultimately that they build in their lives?
Sure. Great place to start. I think you want to have a system that's easily accessible wherever you are. And if that's in the form of a little notebook that you carry around in your jacket's pocket or something like that, that's totally fine. But just make sure you always have it with you, because one of the things that, to me, I'm sure it's the same for you. You have good ideas and you're walking around on your way to get some groceries. I want to not forget those things. I'm not obsessive about this, by the way. There are people especially people online with large followings, who will, I think they're a bit obsessive about this and will tell you should write down every good thought that you ever have in your life. And I'm like, okay, that's clearly not going to happen. But there's some balance to be found between trying to remember everything and not writing anything down, and compulsively writing things down. And so when I feel like, hey, that's something that I need to remember to do, buy a gift for someone, and there's a chance I might forget it, I quickly write it down. So whether that's on your little notebook or in an app, something that you always have it with you. And so, we all have phones. We all have our phones with us all the time. Not everybody, but pretty much everybody these days. So apps, I think, are generally a good choice. Now, again, which app is, you can talk about that, but having some place, and even if it's as simple as using the reminders app that comes with your iPhone to just write down some of these things, you're already going to see a massive improvement, right? And this helps in so many ways. This helps, for example, for people who chronically feel overwhelmed. It can be so handy to just have a list of everything that you need to do. I think sometimes people are afraid that if they write down all the things that they need to do, somehow it'll feel like they have more work. But of course, all this work already existed. It was just floating around in your head. And by writing it down, I always find that it's more manageable. You can still only work on one thing at a time, but at least you can make a plan, you can prioritize. And so start with something where it's really easy to capture. Just make a list and some way of organizing that list, of giving a priority to some items and not to other items. That's a fantastic start.
Right. And I'm going to add to that, but about this list, say, well, I write things down on paper, but what's powerful for me is that whatever task manager I use must have something where I can organize things into projects or lists or areas, whatever you want to call those, and every app calls them something different. But it's not enough for me to say, take the garbage out is one task, and develop a training for my staff in this area. That's the two are completely different. Yes, I have to do them both, but one may require 27 steps. One may, or at least keep it in an area, and so that's very important. And that's what I think when people just use paper, then you're not really categorizing it into what needs to be done. I use the projects extensively. I have my entire task list and so on broken out by projects, so I can say, all right, this implementation we're doing at work, what has to happen in there, and then someone calls me on a staffing issue, and that's in another, and I can go down and say, yeah, don't forget, we need the resume for this person, and we need that. That's so powerful. You have no idea, and that's when people say, how do you remember it all? I don't, but it's here. So
yeah. I think
100%.
my biggest challenge has been, and maybe this is something, Peter, that you tackled, has been the maintenance and executing on those things. So we had, when we started this podcast, both of us you were using Todoist at the time.
At the time, yeah.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that tool, but I downloaded it, I paid for it, and I started using it, and I had all these great categories. I had, the podcast, I had work, I had my Pilates certification. I was like, okay, this is a good way for me. I had personal. But then what I found was that maybe it was a matter of I didn't connect it to my, the PC that I have to use for work, and it wasn't connected everywhere. So it became another thing that then I had to keep up with. So I think like there's probably other people like me. Maybe I'm unique, but keeping up with it is a big piece of, I think maintenance and being successful.
Yeah. And I appreciate both of the points that you guys brought up, because Joe was saying it matters how you organize the app, and you're saying, Christina, it matters that you actually keep using it. And so those are both crucial. I just want to go back to what Joe said first, and then I'll answer what you mentioned, because when I tell people, listen, I recommend that you use this app instead of another one, a lot of the times it is because not all to-do apps are the same. And I think when someone is new to a to-do app, they may think, I'm going to look for I'm going to pick the one that looks the prettiest. In fact, Things 3 happens to look quite pretty. The design is very good. I think that's why it appeals to a lot of people. Whereas OmniFocus, the task manager that I used to teach people, looks like a database. It looks like you need to be like a software developer to understand how it works. And that puts a lot of people off. I've given them this feedback. Let's see what happens. So, repeatedly. So, but it matters, because like Joe was saying, like it's really helpful to be able to organize your tasks into, I've got some work tasks, I've got some home tasks, and then there's things called projects. I always say a project is just 2 or more tasks that together contribute to some outcome, So again, it could be like developing a training program. There's a bunch of sub-steps, and let's write out those sub-steps. And there has to be some way of denoting a hierarchy there as well. And then you get into the weeds of some apps are going to let you do that better than others. But to your point, Christina, if you're going to be using an app, and you not just start using it, but if you want to keep using it, it has to resonate with the way that you think, right? You have to feel comfortable using the app, and you have to be able to trust it, that it's going to show you what you want to see, and that it has everything in there that you need to do. And so that part of that is choosing an app that really fits you. And I tend to think that most people actually think quite similarly about their to-dos. That's why I tend to recommend certain apps for most people. And I don't have like a flow chart with like, if this, then that, to this app or something, But also you do have to develop some habits of using it, because I see this all the time. People get very excited and they're like, I'm going to get organized, I'm going to be more productive. And they download some apps, populate those apps with all of their tasks, and then they kind of forget about it after 2 weeks. They go back to trying to remember everything, using whatever is unread in their email inbox as their to-do list. This is another very popular way of having a to-do list. And that doesn't work. And so one of the things that I always recommend that people do is a weekly review. So just sit down once a week, go through everything that's in your to-do list, in your task manager, right? Look at all the lists, all the projects, make sure that everything in there is up to date. There's nothing in there that you've already completed. There's nothing in there that is no longer relevant. Anything that you need to do is actually in there, so you add some stuff. I mean, this takes me like 20 to 30 minutes one time a week. I do it on Sundays. Sundays tends to work well for a lot of people, but you can do it whenever. And it's also a moment to look ahead. What's coming up this week? What are what deadlines do I have coming up? What is my rough plan for the week? And it only takes 20 or 30 minutes a week, but it makes an enormous difference in how much you'll get done the rest of the week. And once you do this a couple of times, I find that most people see the value in doing this and are like, wow, this is making such a difference in my life that it's actually quite easy to keep doing it. But you got to kind of get over that initial hump a little bit, because if you're new, then there's a lot of stuff that you probably have to organize.
Yeah, and you've got to build the habit. I like that. I like that weekly audit, though. That's a good I do that with my calendar, kind of looking ahead and looking behind. But I think with a to-do. So I'm going to, my homework from this podcast is going to be to download Things 3 and then to build it and then set a calendar reminder for a weekly audit for 30 minutes.
Yeah, and exactly. And I really recommend just doing it at like the same time every week if you can. For some people, Friday afternoon makes the most sense, or Monday morning, whatever works. I wanna spend just a minute, because you're like, okay, I'm gonna try Things 3, and maybe some of the listeners right now are like, why is this app so good? Like, why is it so hyped? You know. First of all, this app is only available on Apple devices. Very important to know, because if you use an Android phone, if you have a Windows PC, you're not going to be able to run this app there, and that's annoying. People always ask me, how can I use this app on Windows? I'm like, I'm sorry, you can't. What app should I use on Windows? I don't really have any recommendations for you. But
I'll give you one before you're done.
Oh, sure. Let's talk about that. But some of the things that this app does really well is, first of all, it lets you organize your life into areas, like Joe was saying. So I've got home, I've got personal and stuff, and an app like Todoist, which is a different app, doesn't really let you do that very well. Another thing that Things 3 does very well is it has these things called projects. And so projects are not just lists, it's different. A list is maybe home maintenance tasks, something that you're always going to have home maintenance tasks. You can call that an area. This is Things 3 terminology, right? But then there's these things that projects that, like, they have a beginning and an end. Like they finish at some point. And it's actually so valuable to think of your life as having a bunch of big projects. Just when I do this exercise, sometimes I work with people one-on-one, or I'm just chatting with friends or whatever who are new to this, just doing this exercise of, oh yeah, actually, you know what? Like, I've got this thing going on in my life, and it's a project, you know, whether it's like getting your driver's license or anything. And it's so helpful for them to collect all of these tasks. And Things really helps you think about this in a really nice way that is just trickier to do on paper and trickier to do in the extremely basic flavors of to-do apps. So if people are wondering why this app is so hyped, it's just a really natural way of thinking about things.
That's
great. And they even have, and I'll trying to stay away from boring, features so that we don't have listeners turning off. But even on the lock screen on your iPhone, I have a plus button, the Things lock screen widget. And literally, if I think of something, I hit the plus, it opens up immediately into a list. I can just type into what they call an inbox, where it's not categorized, but you just get stuff off your head and in there.
Is there a way for for people like myself, and I'm being very selfish here with this podcast.
Yeah, she really took over
really
this whole thing, Peter. It's
well,
terrible.
I'm just like,
You're speaking for a whole lot of people.
I'm trying. I'm hoping that I'm speaking for a whole lot of people. Otherwise, I'm just being very selfish. But for people that, like, for me, I'm an Apple user personally. But for professional, for work, we have PCs, right? So sometimes you don't have a choice of what your employer is subscribed to, right?
Right.
So for people that may have both devices in their life, is there a way to still, since Things 3 seems to be, one of the best productivity tools that you've found, is there a way to still make it work? Like, is there a way to forward emails, or like, is there a way to make it work even though you don't have it maybe resident on your laptop or something?
Yeah, I tell people, buy an iPad and bring the iPad to work, and then put it on your desk and then manage your tasks there. This is like by far the most common question that people ask me is like, Peter, like, this app does not exist for Android phones. It does not exist on my Windows computer network. I have to use a PC. What can I do? Is there another app that you recommend? But weirdly, I have not found a single good to-do app that is available on Windows and on Android phones. There are lots of apps that people will tell you are good, like Todoist, but that if you start using them, they're very confusing. Let me give you an example. One of the nice things in Things 3 is if you have a to-do, let's say, review my friend Mark's resume. You have a friend, his name is Mark. He's applying for some new jobs. You need to review his resume. Okay. He says, listen, I have to send this resume in by Friday. So the deadline is Friday. That's great. When are you going to do this? Ideally, you're going to not do this Friday. Ideally, you're going to do this some days before so that he has time to look at your comments. So maybe you plan to do it on Tuesday. In an app like Things, you can say, I plan to do this Tuesday, but it has to be done by Friday. That's the deadline. Those are two different things. 99% of to-do apps don't let you make this distinction. And
that's very true.
To me, it is bizarre. I do not understand it. It's the most basic thing, is asking, when am I planning to do it, and when does it absolutely need to be done by? Those are, if you work with other people, those things are so important in terms of communication. And
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's all right. But and so I'm perplexed why there is no app available almost for Windows and Android that lets you make this basic distinction. There is an app called Nirvana, which I sometimes recommend to people, that's available on all platforms. It just has a bit of an outdated user interface, so I have a hard time recommending it to people because people look at it and they're like, yeah, this looks like it's 10 years old. So once you get past that, it's fine. But this is an example of using any app is going to be better than trying to remember everything in your head. But once you are taking this seriously, you're thinking, I really, really want to get organized, then you need to start paying attention to what apps can actually do, and not all apps are the same.
Right. I'll tell you one, and this will be funny. Well, maybe not, but Todoist and TickTick have they gamify the act of keeping up with it. So, for example, Todoist, you set goals I want to do 5 things a day, so many things, whatever, and then it measures that and says you've hit that goal 17 days, whatever. Yeah, that got me. I started to get anxious because I would say, oh my God, I only did 4 today, and I don't want to lose my streak. It had streaks. And then I would, think of something. Oh yeah, I did take the garbage out, put the garbage out, boom, and click the thing, and I met my streak.
Right. Woo, I'm productive.
Right. Exactly. Now TickTick does it a little bit smoother in the sense that it just keeps track of your accomplishments, and it gives you graphs and all kinds of stuff. And then you earn points and you hit levels. And
I see.
I am at some kind of super high, productivity level and all that.
Congratulations, Dad.
Yes.
Humble brag.
And it tells you, yes. and it tells you are more productive than 78% of all TickTick users or whatever. But again, I started getting anxious because I want to be more productive than 99% of the users.
Yeah.
When you kept harping on things 3, I'm blaming you, Peter. So that's,
I will take all the blame.
There you go. The beautiful thing that I loved about it is that if I have 12 things to do today in my today, and I know, Christina, you haven't seen it, but it says today, do today. Well, if I don't do them tomorrow, they show up tomorrow. So it now says today. TickTick says 12 things overdue. It's almost like this.
Right.
And you have to say, I'm really sorry. And then it moves it over to the day. Todoist does the same thing. Overdue.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not really overdue because I wanted to do it today, but then 42 other things came up.
Right.
And like you said, I haven't hit a deadline. It's just, I wanted to do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. That has been very freeing for me with things 3. It just shows up. And then if there are 5 more things that were supposed to happen, it just says, we're adding 5 things. Okay. And it comes in.
So it's better for reprioritization without you feeling bad and guilty about it.
And my high blood pressure and stress, so I don't need any anymore. So, Peter, that was probably the single thing with things 3 that said to me, I'm going full bore in this. And that made me then buy the iPad app also on top of the Mac and the iPhone app.
But it's a great point because, like Christina was saying earlier, like you have to want to use an app, and if an app is going to make you feel anxious, you're not going to keep using it, right? I mean, hopefully not. Hopefully you sort of have the self-awareness of like, oh shit, this is making me feel anxious, and so it does matter what app you use. And from my perspective, you might imagine the communication challenges here because, if I'm at a party and people ask me, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I mean, I teach people how to be more organized and productive with apps. And then I get very excited about certain apps. Like people are kind of like, cool, man. Like that's not something that people like. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like this will really make your life better. I mean, I've learned not to push this because
exactly.
People need to be in the right frame of mind to receive things,
That's correct.
But yeah, and your example is so good because a lot of apps do this. It's like they let you set one type of date on a task. So you have a task and you say, I'm going to do it today, but you don't get around to it today, rolls over to tomorrow. And it just becomes a snowball, like an avalanche of tasks that you meant to complete in the past, but you haven't. And so you think, I am so bad. I cannot complete anything. I'm always failing on my plans. And it just makes you feel bad. Yeah. So I really appreciate being able to say, I'm planning to work on this today, but the deadline is Friday, and then you're not very likely to miss deadlines either, because you know that if you use deadlines only for things that are really, really important, you're going to prioritize those things and accept that everything else, it's fine. I had an intention, but it's okay. Right. So matters a lot. And if you use the right apps and you use them in the right way, you can go to the opposite end, not anxious, but you're going to be, wow, I feel so calm. I feel so confident. I've got everything under control. And then, then in the end, you can focus on work. And that's also why I find gamification, for example, a very silly thing to do in a to-do app, because in the end, life is about being happy. And, whether you did 5 tiny tasks today or one really big project, like the 5 tiny tasks are probably not more important than whatever big project you could have completed, right? That would only count as one. So I find that silly.
And things like, and of course, I keep saying the word things, and I'm not talking about the app, so I got to use a different word. But TickTick, for example, is feature rich, and I very much enjoyed that. It has a Pomodoro timer, that it'll track. But realistically, and by the way, that's just I
know for the listeners,
for the next for listeners, it's a very good task. Or disciplining yourself to say, you know what, I have a lot to do, but I'm going to set for 45 minutes. I'm just going to work on this one thing, and you literally block everything out and do it. And I found for me that's very helpful for things that I really don't want to do, and I've been putting off, and to just block it out. I'm not good with blocking it out formally on my calendar. I just do it myself. But my phone has a top timer, and I use an Apple Watch, and that has a timer. I don't need the app to necessarily, time it. Just to give you an example of features, that have that. And Christina, you brought up something about emails, and I just want to address the thing of Apple versus using a Windows machine, because I have the same thing at work. I have to use a Windows machine, but I do have my MacBook with me all the time. I have and my phone. What I tend to do, and you do a weekly review, I do it as much as I can every night. I just go through and I move things along where they should be. But I print out the today in a PDF, and I just bring that PDF, and I know it sounds silly, but
Peter looks like he wants to laugh at you.
Yeah.
This is
no.
This is old school, but
No. I print it out and have it on my desk, because I always have the app open. I am always using it on there. But if I
don't worry, we get it. You're still old, though.
No, no, I'm really techie, and I'm just saying. But if you want, you can print it out and check off items as you go through, and then go to your phone.
I mean, I'm making fun of you. I probably would do that too.
Yeah, don't make fun of me. That's it. No. Breakfast, you won't get breakfast after this, folks. So anyway, there are ways to manage that. Even you don't always have to be on the app, and you have your phone with you, as you said, Peter. So I'm always picking it up and saying, call Peter and tell him this, or do whatever I have to do.
So Peter, what would you recommend somebody getting into this? You said, weekly reviews. How long does it take, would you say, for somebody like if you were saying stick with it and make sure that you stick with it for X amount of time to really build that habit or make it a practice that you keep in your life?
I don't think there's a magical number of times that you can do something and then have it be a habit. I think my personal theory of habit formation is that you have to see the benefits, and once you're experiencing the benefits, once you experience them as strong enough, then you kind of can absorb some blows to your routine or whatever it is. So this can be with anything, like going to the gym regularly, right? Making healthy food, cooking for yourself rather than ordering in all the time, maybe, or something like this. Weekly reviews for me are just a way to reassure myself that I'm not forgetting about any of the things that I meant to do. It's a way for me to look at what are some upcoming deadlines. Oh, there's a birthday coming up. I got to buy a gift for someone, or like, oh, hey, I've got a podcast coming up. Let's make sure that I tell my girlfriend, hey, I have a podcast at such and such time. Can you make sure not to interrupt me? Don't knock on the door, things like that. But it makes me feel really calm. And it lets me then actually focus on those things and prepare. And because I have that experience many, many times now because I've been doing this for years. To me, there's no question. Even if I'm on vacation on Sundays, I'm going to take, maybe I do it a bit faster, not as in depth, but at least 10 minutes, And so there's not, you don't need to sit down for an hour or two every Sunday. Even if you take 5 minutes just to have a quick look at like, what deadlines do I have coming up in this next week? And what am I going to work on in the next day or two? Okay, fine. It will take you 5 minutes, but it already gives you a lot more peace of mind. And even if you spend that 5 minutes and it helps you have a little bit more peace of mind, maybe you're like, I could do a bit more of a thorough job. So maybe next time I'll not just do a quick look at what is coming up this next week and what am I going to work on today and tomorrow, but maybe you'll also take a look at your email inbox. It's one of the things that I do. I just make sure that every single email that I've received, I have either sort of marked, I've read it or I've marked it as I need to reply later to someone, right? Or maybe I've created a whole task for it because it requires me to do something or something like that. But I feel like, okay, you know what? I'm on top of my email and nothing slipped through the cracks. If you have a little bit more time, you can also incorporate some other things. For example, I also take a quick look at any notes that I took in the past week and anything in my notes that has an action item in there that I didn't write down in my to-do list or my to-do list. And once you do this, I think for most people, once you do this 3 or 4 times, you're going to see that even just a very small amount of investment of your time is going to make you feel a lot more in control of things, and it's going to free up a lot of mind space. But maybe for some people, it'll take a bit longer. Could be. Yeah,
but I agree with that. And I just want to say one thing about you. You can forward emails from your Outlook and whatever you're using.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I do that constantly. I forward everything. It goes right into the inbox. And the last thing, and then you can say what you're going to say, is because it's on the phone, this review that Peter's talking about, or that I do it, every night, I'm sitting and relaxing with the TV on and I have my phone and I'm looking at taking everything in the inbox and seeing if I can categorize it. Do I still want to do that? Changing the due dates. It's not like I'm going into my office and I'm sitting at the computer and I'm going to spend a half hour.
Right.
And I'm on my phone. I could be driving with somebody. I could be at lunch.
You could be drinking a coffee. You could be drinking a mimosa.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Peter. So I just want to get that out. This is not something so onerous, that I'm going to discipline myself anywhere, anytime. I've woken up at 3 a.m. sometimes, just annoyed that I woke up, and then I pick up the phone and organize some things and then go back to sleep. Anyway, go ahead.
So the question I was going to ask, Peter, as you were talking about, taking the time and looking at your inbox, I was just curious, as a productivity expert, are you an inbox zero guy? Like, what is your method for inbox management?
Great question. So I use an app called Hey. That's over at hey.com, like hey as in hello. It's an email app that is fairly new, maybe a year or two old now, but a bit different than most email apps. And to me, again, I like this tool because it works the way that I think. And that's something that I was saying earlier as well. A lot of the times, if people are like, this app sucks, the app doesn't suck. It's just it doesn't think the way that you think, And there's a really lovely button in this email app that is called Reply Later. And so if I'm looking at an email, I could click the Reply Later button. And now I have a list of emails that I need to reply to later. And it allows me to not worry about even creating to-dos in my task management app. Because most emails that I need to reply to later, it's going to take me 20 or 30 seconds to reply. If something takes me a long time, I need to actually prepare a document or whatever, then I'll create a separate to-do for it. But I find that, at least for me, the vast majority of the emails that I need to do something with is quite fast, maybe maximum 2 minutes. And so I use this reply later feature all the time. I don't have any concept of inbox zero. I find that very strange. I get emails and either I unsubscribe because I don't want to get them anymore, right? Or I read them or I peruse them, glance at them, and I'm done, whatever. That's great. It sits there. Or there needs to be some follow-up. If there's a follow-up, I'll mark it for reply later periodically, maybe a couple times a week. I'll go through all those things that need a reply later. It's not always a reply. Sometimes it's a small action that you need to take, whatever. I do the small action or I reply. That's it. So I don't bother organizing my emails into folders, which is especially It's actually quite funny. Quite a large chunk of my audience is retired folks. I always love talking about this because
that's so interesting.
I know. I get so many emails from people who are like, "Hi, Peter," because they buy my course and then I send them an email and it's like, "Hey, do you mind introducing yourself? I'd like to hear from my students." And then so often it's like, "I just retired. I guess it's funny. I had a whole career, and only now after I stopped working, I'm getting organized." Ha ha ha! And I always find it's really funny. It's like suddenly a lot of your responsibilities go away, and then you're like, "Now I'll get organized." But especially some of the older folks tend to have grown up, or maybe not grown up, but sort of they've used email for a long time in the way where they felt like every email needs to go in a folder. That's how it works. And I find that really unnecessary. If I'm looking for an old email, I can search, and I will almost always find it very quickly with search. And so I find that it takes a lot of time to categorize my old emails. And so I just decided not to. And this app that I mentioned, hey.com, it's like designed to not like there is no way basically to put things in folders. And I find it such a relaxing way of dealing with it. I never have to worry about like inbox zero is just like a concept, I guess, that means I've processed all my email. Yeah, that happens to me sometimes. I've listed some of them as reply later, which really means process later. Every now and then I go through them and then I'm done. So I guess you could call it inbox zero, but it doesn't mean that somehow there's zero emails in my inbox because yeah.
Well, and you don't have that pressure and anxiety of like, oh my gosh, I have to put all these in the folders they belong in, and I have to assign all the tasks, and I have to. It's more an organic. It sounds like you have more of an organic process that works.
And of course, it depends on the context, right? Like if I know, I have plenty of friends with corporate jobs, and I sometimes look at the amount of emails that they receive every day, and I'm like, this is absolutely insane. I do not understand why you receive this much email. So, I'm not in that situation because I run my own small business, you know what I'm saying? So if I were in a situation like that, maybe I'd apply a little bit more organization. It's possible, but still, if I sort of look at that, I find that the vast majority of email that most people get is not actually that relevant. So,
Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Peter, as we start to kind of wrap up here, what is next for you? What keeps going through my head is, things 3. There's been others. Do you have aspirations of creating your own productivity app? I might be presumptuous right now, but
I have thought about this. The thing is, I have, I think, an amazing sense of what a good to-do app should look like, just because I've spent so much time evaluating to-do apps, teaching people how to use them, talking to people about how they use their to-do apps, probably more than, probably not many people on the planet who've spent more time thinking about this than I have, which is a very interesting niche I always find to be in. But I also, as a teenager, started doing some software development. This is a long time ago now, but because I did that as a teenager and a little bit throughout college and I have a sense of how difficult it is to make good software products. So it'd be very easy for me to say, I know exactly what a good to-do app should be like. I can sketch it out for you. It's just that making the actual app and making it work smoothly on various devices, making sure it always supports all the latest features of your iPhone and stuff, that is not easy. It requires many full-time developers. You need to think about data security. A lot of times I get questions from people that say, like, listen, I'm not allowed to use this particular app, Things 3. It's not certified by my IT department, something like that, So those are things you have to consider. Do we want to try to get certified for some things or not? It's a much bigger project. So sometimes in my head, I'm like, yeah, maybe I should do my own app. And then even just spending 5 minutes thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to deal with all of those things. So I'd rather just give people advice.
So when you start building out, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you start building out the project in Things 3 and you list out all of the milestones that have to happen in order for your app to come to fruition, you say, I don't know about this.
Yeah, if my business ever becomes insanely successful where I have way more money than I know what to do with, I might give it a shot, because at that, my philosophy in life is generally I only want to do things if I'm going to do them well, I don't like half-assing anything. It would require a team of probably at least 5, maybe 10 developers. It just gets very expensive very fast. And it might be a fun project someday, but, I don't want to do a bad job of it because I think it's just a little bit sad to build an app that's kind of just not it,
Right, but you kind of you helped people. There are people that are more programmer minded, And Notion is a very unique application where it's a clean slate, and you can pretty much do anything you want in it as not a programmer, without having to be a programmer. But you have to kind of want to do something with that. Because I did what you did. I used Notion, by the way. I wanted to use Notion as my task manager.
Yeah.
And my notes and my projects and everything. And it was really fine, except that personally, I started like having so much fun with it that I was spending too much time developing my task manager and not doing the work. So that's where things and take to whatever you want to use is better, because your brain can stay on what you have to do and not trying to program it, to do something else. So.
Yeah, it's funny because for a long time, my most popular YouTube video on my YouTube channel was one called "Stop Using Notion for Everything."
I watched it. Yes,
it's very funny because Notion is, like you're saying, this blank slate app where you can, without knowing any programming, although you have to know some programming concepts, you can build your own whatever customer relationship management system or to-do app or anything you want, really, and that's fun for people who find that fun, but it's also an extreme source of procrastination for a lot of people. And so my recommendation was, try not to do everything in this app. Generally use dedicated apps and maybe only use Notion for some things. I was a little bit, I will admit this, I was a little bit irritated when I recorded that video. It was a bit ranty. And I think people picked up on this, and I had to turn off the comments because there were some really, really nasty comments on that video.
Very
like about disgrace and everything. You're like, it was so bad. It was so bad. And it was also a lesson for me to stay positive. It was really, really me saying things about an app that are not its strengths. And to be honest, I decided then that it's actually nicer to just highlight the good things about apps and people and processes and stuff like that. And if you do have feedback, to be really constructive about it. So I've been trying to do that instead. It feels better. And fortunately now I have another video that is well outperformed that. So if people are looking for my most popular video, it's no longer the ranty one. So.
Good.
Well, that's awesome, and I love your the positive outlook. Positive outlook. I can speak today, I promise. And just I think that your videos are very motivating, and they make it simple to take bite-sized pieces out of how to get a little bit more organized every single day. So I appreciate that. Peter, if you were to tell the listeners, how can they engage with you? Where can they find you? And we'll, of course, share all of your page links and whatnot. But, tell our listeners how they can get engaged.
They can go on YouTube and search for my name, Peter Akkies. So that's Peter and then Akkies. I'll pop up and they can peruse some of my videos.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for indulging me in this personal productivity coaching that I feel like we just did on this podcast. Hopefully, listeners, I apologize if you guys have very different interests when it comes to productivity, but I figured that there's probably a lot of people that are somewhat novice like myself that could really benefit from Productivity 101. So, Peter, thank you for that. And we are looking forward to what's next, whatever that is. And just, we'll continue to, get better and better with your expert direction in the productivity space.
Yeah, we'll probably have comments. They'll go both ways. They'll be, tell Joe to shut up, and I want to hear more about how I could be more productive without the app. And then others will be, I don't care about, not using paper. I want to hear about things 3. I want to hear about. So it'll be great. But it was an honor to have you here. And, I think your biggest strength and your success on YouTube and in business is you're approachable and you're pleasant, and you really make it effortless to make that, jump into productivity. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much for having me on. It was super nice to chat. And I also appreciate it from my end because whenever I chat with people, I always get new ideas for videos to make. So, Christina, you just said I get a little bit more productive every day. And now I'm like, maybe I should do a 7-day video series, get a little bit more productive every day. So there's a lot in here for me as well. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Good. And we'll share this, we'll share this all with you and stuff. So we're going to play our little closing thing. And our closing little, what do we call it? Our little
You can
jingle?
just play it. Yeah.
I'll play it. And then and you stay on, and then we'll turn it all off. We'll chat, whatever. So
You just
here
ruined
we
this
go.
whole recording.
I did
because
ruin
we
the whole
can't edit
thing.
video like that. Chad.
Wherever you are, whatever your story, thanks for spending time with us this morning. Now, go and make a difference in your world.
Peter, I have to thank you, but because you were a guest, we were spared a dad joke this episode.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily,
I think he
yes.
completely forgot about his dad jokes. And if he doesn't get it out before the end of this song, we all are spared a dad joke
Why
this time.
couldn't the Sesame Seed leave the gambling casino? Because he was on a roll.
Oh.
So I got it in.
All right. There we go.
Fun. All right.
This is really fun, though.